We live at a time where if you try to get your church to help mobilize voters or to speak on the issues of the day, like abortion or transgender cases, etc., then all of a sudden you get accused of, quote, end quote, just preaching politics. Some liberal denominations present Jesus Christ as if he's woke. The Babylon Bee website, in fact, has a brilliant satire spoofing the whole idea of a woke Jesus. But meanwhile, should the church just ignore politics? Thankfully, the founding fathers didn't think so. Not that they were all Christians, but most of them were. And even the couple of the or three deist types amongst them still believed that there was a God that would hold us all accountable one day. Neil Mammen is a Christian apologist. He's the founder of NoBlindFaith.com. He's also the author of a book called Jesus is Involved in Politics. Why aren't you? Why isn't your church? I'm Jerry Newcomb. This is Vocal Point, and we welcome Neil Mammen back to the program. Neil, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Jerry. It's always great to see you and talk to you again. And it was great to meet you back at the Liberty Pastors event. So that was a lot of fun there.
Absolutely. So what do you say when somebody says, oh, we just want to preach the gospel? So Neil, don't talk us about Jesus and politics.
Here's a question, and it's a question I ask most pastors. What part of a prophet's role is not your role? Go through all the prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Nathan, right? Or Nathan.
Oh, I've got one for you. Daniel. I'm just kidding.
Sorry?
Daniel. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, Daniel. Samuel. What part of their role is not part of your role? Every single one of them talked to kings or talked about politics or fought with the people. You go, that's just about Israel. No, Daniel was not in Israel. Daniel was in Babylon. He was in his adopted nation, or rather the nation he's stuck into. So there is no excuse for any pastor to say, I should not talk about politics unless he says, you know what, I'm not going to be a prophet. I'm not going to speak truth into this culture. I'm not going to speak. And then the next question I have to ask is, okay, so you don't want to get involved in politics, so you think child prostitution is okay. And most pastors look at me like, I don't see the connection. In fact, I had one friend go, wait, why did you change topics on me? I'm like, no, I'm not changing topics. Let me explain why. If you don't think you should get involved in politics, you think child prostitution should be okay. Here's why. Because the only reason why child prostitution is illegal is because a pastor got involved in politics, because a Christian got involved in politics. And then in fact, if you don't think you should get involved in politics, then the most obvious example is that you think slavery is okay. Oh, no, how can you say that? Exactly, because slavery was banned because Christians got involved in politics. Not Christians, but a specific pastor named John Newton. You've heard of John Newton. He was the one who wrote Amazing Grace. He got involved in politics. In fact, he recruited William Wilberforce, whom we all know, and Thomas Clarkson, and they fought. In fact, his church was the center of the activity to fight against slavery in England. And it took them 40 years. And while they were fighting slavery, let me assure you, they were the most hated people in all of England because everybody thought slavery should be okay as long as they were not the slaves. It was only because John Newton fought against slavery that slavery was banned. Let's go back. In fact, we can go through a list of all these different laws that were changed only because pastors got involved in politics. How about abandonment of elders, abandonment of babies, gladiatorial combat, death games, slightly different from gladiatorial combat, death games. How about in India, William Carey got involved and stopped the immolation of widows on their husband's funeral pyres in India, in a Hindu country. He wasn't even Indian. He was a pastor who went to this other country, and he was a missionary, and he said, we've got to stop it. And they stopped throwing women in their husband's funeral pyres. Now, you think that's not important? How can you as a pastor say that's not important to me? And then my question to you is, who is the moral authority in your community? Let's say there's a moral issue that comes up. Are you the moral authority in the church? You say the Bible is. Yeah, but you're speaking from the Bible. Okay, so are you the moral authority in your community? If there's something happening in your community, shouldn't you and the pastor in the church next to you, across the street or down the block, shouldn't you guys be the moral authorities for that community? Okay, what about the county? Should all the pastors in the county get together and say, look, according to the Bible, this is the moral values for this things, this is the moral values, and we are the moral authority? Yeah, what about your state? What about your country? Now, so my question to pastors is, if you're the moral authority, why are you abdicating that moral authority to some atheistic, socialistic, God-hating, homosexual-promoting lawmaker in Congress? Whose job should it be? You should be the ones going to that congressman and saying, no, this is wrong. You should be the Samuel. You should be the Nathaniel going to David and saying, this is wrong. You should be John the Baptist. You shouldn't be sleeping with your brother's wife. You should be the person who's going out there and talking to everyone. Who else is supposed to do it?
But we're not supposed to reach politics. All right. By the way, I can't help but think of the line where somebody said you can't impose your morality on others, or you can't legislate morality. But isn't it true that all legislation to some degree reflects somebody's morality? The question is, whose morality? And we see the world has been blessed by Judeo-Christian morality, just in that handful of examples that you gave. But as Christian influence has gotten away from the culture, now we see Katie bar the door. Things are just getting worse and worse for Americans because we've forgotten God.
Here's the question that I also like asking pastors. Where do you think we got the concept of the republic? If you don't think the Bible talks about politics, it only talks about politics in some of the books in the Old Testament. But if you just don't think the Bible talks about politics, where do you think we got the idea of the Republican form of government? It's from Exodus 18. It's the first time in all of history. It wasn't from the Greeks, it wasn't from the Romans, it wasn't from the Babylonians. The first time we see the Republican form of government is in Exodus 18, where it's actually appointed to us to be to have a Republican form of government. Go read it. Right? And then you can go move on to Deuteronomy where he expands on it. So we are commanded by the Bible that the best form of government is the government that God gave us, and that's the Republican form of government. If people say, Jesus didn't vote. If you go read Exodus, you'll notice that everybody was supposed to vote for the 1 in 10. And then those would vote for the 1 in 50, and those in 1 in 100. Jesus voted for his 1 in 10. You think that Jesus would not have obeyed the Old Testament? Do you think he abandoned the law of the Old Testament? He would have voted. He would have been involved in that. But here's the second part of that. So what happens in the Republican form of the government, you're supposed to vote for 1 in 10, and they vote for 1 in 50, and they vote for 1 in 100, and then 1 in 1,000. And then at the top level, you have the ruling class, the people who actually make the laws for the nation. Everybody else makes the laws for the lesser values, which is exactly the form of government we have in America. The founding fathers designed it after Exodus 18. So we have a biblical government. But now here's the question. Could Jesus have gotten involved with those people at the top, hundreds voting for the thousands? He couldn't have voted for them because unless he had moved up the ranks politically, he wouldn't have any say in it. But could he interact with them? It turns out that the Jews had a form of government that's exactly like ours, except they were governed by Rome. Now, Jesus was not a Roman citizen. He was a Jewish citizen. So he couldn't do anything with Rome. Imagine when we were in Iraq, governing Iraq, we didn't run their local elections. In the same way the Romans had hundreds of nations, they couldn't run the local elections. Everybody had their own government, and the Romans just controlled the very top, which would have been Pilate, the governor of Judea. That's what they had. So Jesus did have a governing body, the people who made their laws, and they were called the Sanhedrin, the Council of 70. They sat in the semicircle, which, by the way, we copied for our legislative body. We sit in a semicircle in Congress, too. Now, once you get there, who are those people? Who are the people? Who were Jesus' senators? Who were his legislators? Who were his representatives? Who were his lawmakers? In the Bible, they call them rulers because they made the rules. Who are they? I hope you're a few seconds ahead of me because they were the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And now you see Jesus was involved in politics on a regular basis, talking to them, explaining things to them. But he was always very nice to them, wasn't he, Jerry? He was very sweet to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He would never call them bad names, would he?
Boy, you make me laugh. But so interesting. One of the things you said earlier about Deuteronomy chapter 1, this is a fascinating point about American and world history. In 1638, a Puritan minister, the Reverend Thomas Hooker, led a number of his fellow Puritans. They wanted to clarify a little bit the Puritan understanding in the Bible and politics and so forth. So they peacefully left Boston, Massachusetts to strike out on their own, create a new colony in Connecticut. And in 1638, this man, Thomas Hooker, preached a sermon based on Deuteronomy 1, basically along the lines of take the rulers that you approve of and put them, and they've got to be godly and so forth, and follow them. After he preached that sermon in 1639, a fully developed constitution was written, the first fully developed constitution in American soil. It's called the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. If you see a license plate from Connecticut, it'll say the Constitution State. That's because of the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, 1639, which was inspired by a sermon from the Reverend Thomas Hooker along the lines of some of the things that you've been actually talking about, Neil. And I think this is just so fascinating. And some scholars have said that basically that Fundamental Orders of Connecticut was an ancestor of sorts of to the U.S. Constitution. And it gets back to Deuteronomy 1. You choose good rulers for yourselves among the people that are godly, so who fear the Lord. So you're absolutely right. Okay, we have a few minutes left about Jesus and politics.
I just want to add one more point,
yes, sir.
Jerry.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, there's an irony here, and I've been waiting for this to happen. I haven't had the privilege of doing this, but I'm waiting for a pastor from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania to tell me that they should not be involved in politics. You know why? Because I'll say, did you know, Pastor, that this state that you live in, that you have the freedom of, was founded by a pastor? You're telling me you should not be involved in politics.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, the City on a Hill reference, that's from a sermon, a model of Christian charity. John Winthrop, founder of the Boston area. Technically, he was a lawyer, but he certainly was a man of God. Okay, we have just a couple minutes left. I understand that one aspect you think that the church today can apply Jesus-oriented politics, if you will, is related to providing some sort of education. We have about a minute and a half left, so go ahead and explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, real quick. Also, first of all, go to mychurchfinder.org, not .com, mychurchfinder.org, and that will show you where to find the churches with pastors who are politically active and biblically sound. So go there, mychurchfinder.org. So what we thought is we realized that many churches have classes that are unused during the week. And we think we need to bring all the kids who are being exposed to socialistic, Marxist, atheistic philosophy and homosexual agenda and transsexualism in the public schools. We need to pull them out. But both their parents work and they can't afford $15,000 or $20,000 for a private school, even a Christian school. So what we decided to do is we said we needed a way to solve this problem and use these extra classrooms that the churches have that they're not being used during the week. Now, a lot of churches have started schools, but many churches don't want to do it because they don't want to deal with OSHA, they don't want employees, they don't want to do any of that. So we came up with an idea. It's called Revive Academies. You can go to reviveacademies.com, and we're just starting it. We're looking for a prototype. We're looking for 3 prototype schools. We already have a couple of them too that we're talking to. So if you are interested, hurry up and go there and send us an email. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to be the Uber of schools. So that means you as a church sign up and say, I got 5 classrooms, and you declare homeschooling as a ministry of your school. A homeschooling mom says, I would love to teach kids and make some money off it. So she goes to that church website, on our website, and she goes to that church and says, I would love to be a homeschool tutor. Then we do a background check of her. She talks to the pastor, says, okay. And now parents can go sign up to send their kids to this homeschool tutors, homeschool for any grade, pre-K through 12. And it's only $25 a day, which means it's under $4,500 a year.
Wow, we're basically out of time, but I want to give that website again, reviveacademies.com, Revive Academies, plural, and Neil Mammen has been our guest for this. So the short answer is yes, Jesus would encourage us, that is churches, to be involved in politics. Neil, thank you so much. All the best.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.